Okay, so really quick commentary on some events that have occurred over the past week. This is in reference to the Majority Report's Michael Brooks doing a commentary on some Sam Harris comments made a few months ago in his conversation on his Waking Up podcast with Majid Nawaz. So now Brooks gets a lot of criticism for talking about Sam Harris, and one of the main things that he's criticized for is what a lot of people actually do with Harris. I've just seen it a lot, and it's taking him out of context and trying to make it sound like he's saying something that he does not say. Now, some of this is on Harris because he does say a lot of stuff that's controversial. Even if you put it in the right proper context, it's still controversial and is still going to create stirs. So my personal view on Sam Harris is I don't agree with a lot of what he says about how we should deal with Islam and the policies that would arise out of such. I don't think it's fair, though, the criticism that he gets that he's a neocon. I think what Brooks does is he says that what Harris says just supports the neocons, whether he claims to that or not, or whether he ultimately is a neocon throughout his entire viewpoint. And I'm going to be as fair as I can be. So I don't agree with Harris a lot on these types of issues. And I do think that Michael Brooks, the spirit of his criticism is correct. So what took place here? So I'm going to play the clip from the Michael Brooks show. Then we're going to look at a response video by this guy, Atheism is Unstoppable, on YouTube. And we're going to talk about what went wrong with the Brooks presentation and maybe a little bit about what Atheism is Unstoppable and what he did wrong. And we're also going to listen to the actual clip from the Waking Up podcast. And we're going to talk about the things that are wrong in there perhaps as well, too. So first, let's start with the Michael Brooks clip.
But what Sam Harris is saying here, with the nodding acquiescence of Majid Nawaz, who really just comes off looking just pathetic and embarrassing here, is an endorsement of Donald Trump policies in a cult leader, boring voice, and really grotesque and disturbing generalizations that affect real people. And I would suggest you look up some actual real stories before you comment on it and whine about him being taken out of context.
What is the fucking point of having more Muslims in your society? It seems perfectly rational to say, we don't want any more. We have enough, right? And certainly increasing the percentage is not a help to anyone who loves freedom of speech and anything else, that any of the other liberal values that you and I just spoke about maximizing. It's not worth the trouble. And if we can figure out some way to keep the number of Muslims down in any society, whether we're honest about this or whether we do this covertly, clearly it's rational to want to do this. And this is where someone like Robert Spencer would say amen, I would presume. Can you speak to that despair? And I mean, again, this is not an expression of xenophobia. This is an expression of the implication of statistics and the fact that it's only rational not to want to live in a world that looks more and more like Jerusalem at the height of the Intifada, right?
Right. That's delusional on many levels, but let's break it down. Okay. I would suggest that the way to preserve quote-unquote liberal values is by protecting, as an example, robust constitutional norms while they're under assault. That might be something that's significant. So I would suggest, while you have a far-right extremist, which you yourself have endlessly pointed out, according to your followers, you oppose, is trying to push, and might, with a far-right Supreme Court, a unconstitutional violation of non-religious discrimination, which is written into, our Constitution, which might be slightly more important than your thought experiments, I would suggest that preserving those protections is slightly more important for this great liberal society, which you seem to care so much about. It seems to me that the only outgrowth of the liberal society that you're interested in is in endless, boring, bigoted wankathons with your friends. First, I'll throw a few statistics out that will make no difference to Harris followers. But according to an FBI report, and this is from 1980 to 2005, but it hasn't changed significantly since then, 94% of terrorist acts carried in the United States were by non-Muslims. Non-Muslims make up a majority of terrorist attacks in Europe. Actually wrong. They make up about 2%. And even if, and I'll quote now from this piece in Huffington Post, even if Muslims carried out all these attacks, which is a absurd assumption, given the fact mentioned in my first point, those terrorists would still represent less than 0.9% of all Muslims. To put things in perspective, that you are more than likely to be struck by lightning in your lifetime than a Muslim is likely to commit a terrorist attack during the same time span. And Sam Harris always talks about Muslims, quote unquote, hiding the ball. When is Sam Harris going to stop hiding the ball? If you hate a religion and have an irrational fixation and fear on it, where you can't talk about it rationally, you can't make basic distinctions, which anybody with any credibility in the field that you claim to be working in make, and you sound like a deranged conspiracy theorist and a bigot, and you're giving a shout out to Richard Spencer, when are you going to stop hiding the ball and admit that disproportionately those people come from certain parts of the world and you're fine with discriminating against them and you don't want them by you? And then as for Maajid Nawaz, look, his whole brand is he's a moderate Muslim whose work can be harmonized with a liberal society. Every time he collaborates with Sam Harris is saying the possibility of that basically doesn't exist. Because the only real Islam is terrorist supporting fanaticism, which, as we've already said a million times, if you know anything about Islam, is a product of modern history.
Okay, so the problem that a lot of people have with this clip, and I'm just going to first bring forth the AIU clip and just show the general problem with what Brooks does here.
But what Sam Harris is saying here...
the interpretation. Thank you. Here we go. Don't listen to the words of Sam Harris. Let's just give me the gist of Sam Harris. Paraphrase the man. I'm sure you'll do it with great honor and integrity. Please go.
And I would suggest you look up some actual real stories before you comment on it and whine about him being taken out of context.
Whining about him being taken out of context. Well, let's see if he is taken out of context. Maybe he isn't. Maybe it was all just smoke and mirrors. Maybe Sam's making it up. Do people take him out of context? I wonder. Let's see.
What is the fucking point of having more Muslims in your society? It seems perfectly rational to say, we don't want any more. We have enough.
Right. That's delusional.
Okay. Oh my God. Where to begin? What did you just say? Where did you start that clip? You just played a clip, and it starts with Sam beautifully using the word fucking, and he says, what is the fucking point of bringing more Muslims in? He starts a sentence. That seems weird that Sam Harris would start a sentence with what is the fucking point. Almost feels like it's not his voice, not the way his mind thinks. I wonder if he was speaking in the first person. I wonder if Sam was speaking for himself. Well, let's check the tape on that, shall we? Because we wouldn't want to take Sam out of context now, would we?
So you see this massacre in the Christmas market, and I think many people will feel, what is the fucking point of having more Muslims in your society?
So you see this massacre in the Christmas market, and I think many people will feel ... What is the fucking point? So he... I mean, does it get more stark than this? That is Sam Harris paraphrasing the general gut reaction that many people he suspects will have to events like the Berlin Massacre. And he is correct. And then they go and discuss the ins and outs of that thought process and whether or not it's legitimate. I personally think it all is completely fair and legitimate and justified. But that's not the point. The point is Sam Harris is not speaking as Sam Harris. But you just suggested he did. Look where you start the edit.
So, yes, it looks like he has taken him out of context, and Harris was actually presenting sort of a hypothetical of how someone might react, not necessarily bringing forth that point of view. Now, I'm going to talk about that, but first let me say that Brooks does get some things wrong and does attribute things incorrectly to Harris. Now, he says that Harris supports a Muslim ban. He does not support the Muslim ban. Okay, so loud cars. I love them. That's awesome, man. Happy trails, buddy. So anyway, he does not. Sam Harris does not support the Muslim ban. He actually has come out and said that it was actually stupid. I believe was his exact words, or I may be getting that from Bill Maher. I don't know, or perhaps they both said that. I'm not sure. But at any rate, he does not support the Muslim ban. So you are kind of misrepresenting him there, or at least being sloppy, because perhaps what you're saying is that these thoughts and ideas that Harris is presenting are contribute to this type of policy, and what, having these ideas in the mix of things and propagating them is what leads to this type of crazy, stupid policy of a Muslim ban. And I'm not going to make comment. I think it's a bad idea myself. So that's all I'll say about that. But so he does get that wrong. But I think the spirit of his criticism is correct. He's just been really sloppy with the presentation. So the reason why I say it's correct is because let's first listen to. We've already listened from AIU's video, the so-called context of what Harris was saying. But later on, he can't get out of it so easy. And here's something that Harris presented on, this is either Facebook or Twitter, I don't remember, but here it is. And so he's very upset, and he's saying that everything is a lie. Well, yeah, so some things aren't correct, like the Muslim ban, for example. But some things are, in fact, correct. And I think that it's righteous to criticize Harris for this. And here's why. So let's play this clip.
Whether we know it to not be us or we're scared of it because we're ignorant of it, it's perfectly normal and natural. Now, ideologues...
But let me just say, that's true, and I think the left is too blind to that variable. But that's not at all what I'm expressing. I mean, so for instance, I am deeply multicultural in my affinities. If you tell me that there's a family from India that's going to move into my neighborhood tomorrow and open a great Indian restaurant within walking distance of my house, I will be ecstatic. That difference is all to the good. What I worry about is bad beliefs that are operative,
that's
right?
That's right.
And so that's the concern.
So as you can see there, Harris totally owns the thing, and now it's his. This is his idea he's putting forth, and the whole thing. And I'm just going to say, they go on to talk about how this just leads to the rise of the right wing by bringing in these immigrants. You're sort of and having and this is a matter of probability. It's a probability argument he's presenting. Like, it's just more likely to have these types of problems the more Muslims you bring in. Now, that could be a flawed thing to say from a statistical standpoint. I'm not sure, from a couple of different ways, because if you bring in, you're going to have nefarious activities from any population that you bring in, from any country, any type of population. You're going to have criminal acts occur. However, I just don't know that you can support that more criminal acts will take place, including terrorism. I'm putting terrorism under the criminal banner. I think that's essentially what it is. It's just a very different form of crime. But you're going to have these nefarious criminal acts of violence occur from a probability standpoint, from any population. But it should be said that the any immigrant population, this is just a stat, that immigration population is less represented in violent crime than the just general population. And that's just a stat. So maybe we need to solve these problems. I mean, we had up until I think it was 2000 and from September 11th, 2001 to 2015, up until the Orlando shooting, the overwhelming majority of terrorist acts that occurred were domestic acts of right-wing terror. So you have to clean up your own house too, At any rate, that's sort of tangential. But they're saying that if you allow this to happen and you bring all these people in, you're just going to wind up having the right wing rise up on you. And that's the reason why you have Trump. That's the reason why you have all these other things going on throughout the world. And I don't know that they also say that if you're bringing in, now this is what Harris specifically says, so I think the criticism against him is perfectly fine, but he says that you're bringing in more Muslims, that means you're going to have less enlightenment or something along those lines. Like you're endangering your enlightened society. Well, how enlightened could the society be if the very act of doing that is going to bring about this right-wing nonsense that they admit isn't enlightened? So I think there's a ton of criticism to be had. I think that Brooks was sloppy in his presentation, and he did sort of misrepresent Sam Harris in a couple of ways. He misrepresented the clip. He should have showed that Harris was presenting sort of a hypothetical, and then showed how, hey, he owns it here later. If you think he's just saying, hey, you might think this way, it's not really the correct way to think necessarily, but this is just a thing people are thinking out there. No, because later on he then says, yes, this is what I'm saying. This is my worry. So I think that his Brooks presentation was sloppy, but AIU's presentation was ridiculous. I mean, he's just basically, well, first of all, it's more about insulting the person that you're dealing with than it is actually, having a substantive response. But, probably his audience just sort of eats that sort of thing up and really likes that type of quote criticism, unquote. And also he seemed to sort of agree with that hypothetical, even if it was a hypothetical, he seemed to sort of agree with it anyway. So, he thinks, hey, that's a legitimate viewpoint, just like Nawaz did. So I really hope I'm not screwing up all these names. I know I've got Sam Harris right. So anyway, I do think that that Brooks has to. He should have presented a more honest, I guess. I don't want to say he's being dishonest, but when you attribute ideas to someone that they don't hold, and then you sort of clip up something he says to make it sound worse, even if he was sort of really, I don't know. It seemed like it could have been done a little bit better. And so even though I agree with the spirit of his criticism to a large extent, I do not agree with the way he presented it and some of the things he said that were just not true. So I think that he needs to work on that, and maybe, who knows, they can get together. I would look forward to seeing them have a conversation on the subject, or any subject really. I think that would be really interesting. Maybe it'll happen. Who knows? But Harris seemed to be pretty pissed But I would like to see Harris actually defend himself other than saying everything in that was not true or whatever it was he said. Maybe he will at some point. So anyway, that's all I got. Thanks.